Hi, good afternoon, home language. Welcome to the first lecture of the semester, 702. Hope you're all doing well, keeping safe, keeping warm. This is the second lecture this week. We did our introduction and welcome yesterday, the 11th of August, along with a fun Kahoot quiz and a Menti survey. I've got some results for that for you. I'm just going to share my screen with you because I just want to chat to you a bit about the assessments before we get started today. Here we go. Let's just get it onto slideshow. Here we go. Just a quick bit of housekeeping. I know some of you hate that from what I've seen in my recommendations. I'm just going to use this black screen for it. All the assignment 5s were incorrectly entered, and I've gone to the process of doing the mark amendment form to upload all the new revised assignment 5s, which will be going on to Embry, but it goes through a process first. The forms have been sent to my HOD, then it'll go to the dean who has to sign them off, and then only will I get access to my Embry to maybe start putting in the revised marks. This all takes time and it is a process. This, as well as all the adjusted marks, the changed marks, I've had quite a few mark queries and I've worked through all of them. These will also be adjusted after I've done the mark amendment form, goes to my HOD, will go to the dean, she signs it off, and only then am I given access to actually put the changed marks onto the system. And even then, you won't be able to see them because they haven't been refreshed. The whole system for the whole of Stadio Education Department has to be refreshed. And only once all the marks are now entered, there's going to be the SOA marks, all the adjusted marks, all the changed marks, all the exam marks. Once they're all in, they have meetings about the marks. Yes, we may be going now into September. And then they refresh the whole thing. And then the new marks go out, the final actual marks. The moderation, external moderation will have been completed by then. And there may be marks that still have to be adjusted because of that. So just please be patient. Know that this doesn't happen overnight. The system doesn't just change all the marks just like that. And there's a process that I've got to follow to get all those changes done. I've got about 75 changes to work through. I've done all the working through, but now it's to put all the paperwork together, which then has to go through the whole process. Okay, so just so that in case you're getting irritated or upset or want it done immediately, it can't happen. So I hope this explains the whole process of what will happen. Okay, so let's get on today's lecture. I'm going to my first slide. Teaching home language, FET and SP, the teaching of language, the structure and use in the home language classroom. And this is week 1 as well. We're going to look at strategies for teaching English language as an overview today, and then we're going to actually go into grammar practices in our next lecture. A lot of you will think in terms of grammar and language as the rules. I think, what are the infinitives? What is the past tense? What are passives? What is the future tense? What about prepositions? And all the rules based with that. And this is very far from what authentic learning and teaching of grammar is all about. It's a very isolated, text-reduced kind of approach. The knowledge of these rules are not really required, but an understanding is. And I hope by the end of today's lecture, you'll gain some understanding of how we're going to approach the teaching of grammar in the classroom. And this very much is what CAPS requires of us as well. Okay. So let's just first go to my first slide, and it comes from yesterday's lecture. How are you feeling today? I wanted to know how you are feeling, because I wasn't too sure how all of you were feeling, especially after the chaotic end of semester 1. The fact that you couldn't see your marks, which I really deeply regret, but they came in too quickly. The marking process was very long, very hard, took ages to complete, so you couldn't get feedback, and I really want to apologize for that. I'm going to see how we can strategize it a lot better this semester. I'm going to have to get more markers in because the student and the marking load is immense. For me, it takes me half an hour per paper to actually mark. Sometimes it's only 10 papers I get to in a day. I never get more than 20. If I get to 20, it's a miracle. Anyway, but we're going to try and strategize this as well. So I did a quick quiz and a quick survey of what was happening, and I see 14 of you have already completed your mentee survey of how you're feeling. And I'm very glad to see that excited comes out in front as the biggest word most used. But of course, you've got the anxious and the nervous on either side, and you've got the tired, which is the other one. I think there's worried, concerned, and those are all meaningful things. I think I would feel the same after such a horrendous and hard semester as well. But I'm glad there's stress there as well. Happy, exuberant, determined, ready to work, hopeful, overwhelmed. I feel a bit overwhelmed myself. Curious, motivated. So there is the positive and the negative. Let's hope the positive comes to the fore and we can really enjoy the semester. I really enjoyed it last year, and I'm hoping you're going to enjoy it as well. And then you've got the Kahoot to do. You've got till the 16th to do it. Once you've listened to my introduction and welcome, you can then go do the fun Kahoot quiz. And you can even go as a pseudonym, don't say your real name, and guess who wins at top of the pops. I think there are 10 questions, and easy, or to do with the actual introduction video. Okay, so let's just quickly look and see what we've done so far this year. The first semester we looked at speaking, listening, and reading, a variety of texts, context, audiences, which all your assignments focused on, the lesson plan on speaking and listening, the genres for the reading, the whole CLT, communicative language teaching, in the essay, as well as the understanding of CALPs. For this semester, we can look at language structures, which is grammar teaching, be part of that, and how to use different conventions appropriately and effectively in the classroom, that is integrated into text-based learning and not just an isolated grammar exercise, like the case study on the tense exercise was, which was just an isolated, not related to any text as well. And then we're going to look at writing as a process, different kinds of writing, transactional writing, essay writing, different audiences, how do we use it? And we're going to finish off with critical language awareness, the importance of how we use language and how it impacts on people's psyches. I just think about emails that are often sent to me, maybe the emails I send out as well. Are we always aware of our tone, how we are using language to bring out the best in people and to be professional in all we do? So to keep that in mind as well, because it's so important in the professional world, and these attributes of graduates are to be able to use language, being very aware of how their language is being used as well and how they approach people. Right, so Unit 1, as I've said today, we're looking at teaching language use and structure, just an overview to language in the classroom. Ferreira, chapter 13 is where you'll find all this good stuff. And I know a lot of you are concerned about errors. If you're language teachers, you've got to know how to use your red pen. I think that's what you all do. So someone says, grammar give many problem. Then you think, oh, this child doesn't know how to use grammar, the rules, where are the rules? But you understood that. I understood it. How important is it that everything is crossed? How can we help students to know what the rules are without actually saying, you've got to know this rule, but to use it within the text that we're looking at. So you want them to say grammar gives, which is your concord, verb agreement, subject, many problems. It's the plural form, not the singular form. So do we use rules as such, or do we rather let them experience with comprehensible input what the rules should be and how they can apply it in a way that's meaningful? And then we'll go on to all the rest after that. Week 2, 3, 4, integrated grammar teaching strategies, resources, and assessing grammar. Assignment 1 is going to be a grammar-based activity that's based on a text, where you are going to use all meaningful ways to understand how grammar actually contributes to understanding a text rather than looking at the rules, okay? But I will explain all this. I'll try to scaffold the assignments a lot more clearer this semester. Again, our sects are the same, our recommended reading and our prescribed reading. Obviously the CAPS document, obviously Ferreira, there we go, okay, and a bit of clean as well as a recommended reading. It's not a problem if you don't have it, but it is there for your use as well. So let's just look at what CAPS says about the principles that they have in the document for teaching and learning language. The first principle is that language learning must be text-based. That means it must be related to some kind of text, whether it is a reading text, a listening text, a speaking text, a visual text. It can't just be isolated, that those lists of direct and indirect speech. It must be text-based in a text. So this gives us the love of learning. It must be taught in an integrated manner, not isolated. So when I'm doing listening or reading or speaking, language is part of that. It's not segregated as a little component with a question thrust in about tenses in the middle of a listening exercise, which doesn't make sense. That you as a teacher are going to mediate it. That means you're going to moderate it, look at it, give out the information so you can scaffold your learners into understanding language use meaningfully, not in an isolated way, but using texts. And it's going to be learner-centered, not the teacher asking the questions and no group work and students sitting passively again while teacher does everything, does all the talk. So this must be very much how learners discover the meaning of grammar and language use. So again, I'm coming back to what is your teaching style? Are you a teacher-centered, learner-centered type of teacher? Yeah, the teacher's still in the front. So she's quite teacher-centered, but she is inviting responses. Not everyone's looking at her, so I'm not too sure how much talking has been done amongst the students, how much they are sharing information within their own groups using the target language. Or have you got more of a group work where they are discussing, where they are using the language in authentic ways, the target language, because they have to get their meaning to their peers, or is it all you driving it? Something like this, okay, going on and on. And you can see how bored those students are, and I don't think much learning is taking place. They're not practicing the language, you are. All right, and that's not what we want. Wow, 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 wow. Careful, if your students are falling asleep or get that glazed look on their eyes, which you might be doing even now, you're not learning, okay. So language study is best done in context, the context of the reading, the context of the genre, a context of the digital literacy. What context are you using? It's not an isolated buzzing bread, isolated rule-based activity where you have to know the rule of concord and tense and past tense. This means that your specific language item, whether it be parts of speech, tenses, they're not really important because it must be done in the context of production, how you speak and you use it. So if I'm speaking about something, how do I use language? If I'm writing about it, if I'm writing a report, it should be in the past tense. If I'm writing conclusions, it should be in the present tense. Good examples to use are the text of newspapers. We'll obviously see how direct speech is used or indirect speech is used in the production side. Or how am I encountering all of these rules, this language use in listening? How am I hearing how the person's using past tense all the time? Or how am I hearing how the person's using direct and indirect speech? Or in the reading, I listen to Audible, so a lot of that is that understanding comes through listening, all right? He say, she say, and so on. And what do I experience in the reading of reports, of newspaper articles? How is language used? Advertisements, and so on. So I'm coming back to Krashen, which he speaks about comprehensible input. This is how we develop proficiency in language, where we take the students from what they know to just a higher level to develop us to the next level. So we need to be always cognizant. Are we challenging the students enough, moving into something that is more complex? So Krashen says the best way to do this is to, first of all, have the pre-learning, which is the pre-listening and the pre-reading stages before we listen to it, before we read. So you can't just throw them in the deep end and say, just listen to this and summarize. Let's get them pre-listening tasks to do so they get used to the listening of something. So you say, in this listening activity, I want you to try and listen to all the positive words you can use, or what were the negative themes that emerge? Who were the characters? So get them like little tasks, let them practice it, pre-listening. And if they are reading something, pre-reading things, like you practice scanning, you practice skimming, and then only then predicting, which is so important, then only get onto the listening or the reading of a story. Or the scaffolding of active listening, how you try and encourage them how to be active listeners or what they need to do and often they will need a task to help them get to that event. And when they understand in the target language, that's English, then they are exposed to comprehensible input. So when they start understanding something, that means they have now gained comprehensible input. Then they can hear and read the story with understanding. So that's the whole thing. You want your students to move to the level, giving them enough comprehensible input so they can actually understand the plot of the story, how they can understand the symbolism in the poem, because you prepared them for it. That's the way we do it. That's why it's got a big tick. This is just looking at Krashen's overview of comprehensible input. If you see the first little face, it's in agony because you've taken it, I is the input, and you've gone +2. It's too difficult. I think often my instructions, it seems, in assignments are I +2 because students battle to understand what I mean in my assignments, and I've got to really structure that and make it clear. So thank you for your recommendations and your reflections. I think I'm definitely going to include the video of instructions so people can come back and listen to it again and then get back to me. I+1 is perfect. Okay, so just a bit more challenging so they can actually achieve the goal and be motivated to continue learning. If it's I+0, you're not giving them, you give them to write out rules or repeat things. It becomes really very, very, very easy to fall asleep and become very bored. So you can't let them fall asleep, they can't be bored. So you've got to give them a bit more challenging all the time. So what is your output? So they must achieve something in what they've gained. Are they going to draw a concept map? Are they going to write a poem? Are they going to do a personal connection, reflection on the work, draw a graph, make a comic? So there must be some kind of output that they've got to require. And that's why your lesson consolidations, don't just ask questions. A lot of you just asked a question. Do you understand? That doesn't show the output. Get them to do something. Get them to write something. What was challenging today? What was easy today? What would you recommend about this? How will you take this to the next level? Give them questions to complete. Let them write. The production side is so important to get them away from just having to answer questions, which is speaking, it's BICS. It's not really the CALP part of learning. So prior knowledge is essential. Even in assignment 3, you were required in the genre studies to say how prior knowledge was connected to your lesson. You had to actually verbalize it. You had to say, well, last week we looked at the short story and the plot and the setting and the climax. Today we're looking at the denouement and the resolution to build on knowledge what is already there. So without prior knowledge, students cannot learn new things. Okay, so they've got to have done something before, and you can't say they did this 2 years ago. That means nothing. You've got to build on what you've done, and maybe it's year by year, week by week. You've got to actually build on that prior knowledge and make that prior knowledge connection very visible and overt in your lesson plans. Right, so learning is a process of making sense of new information, which is very hard. Coming up with a new way to approach grammar, and this might be very alien to you, and you're trying to make sense of what I'm actually saying, and it's very difficult. But you've got to take your understanding of how you were taught grammar, it's your understanding, it's your existing information, and how you're going to change that into new experiences and ideas. So how are you going to develop from the way you think grammar should be taught? So academic learning will not be meaningful if it's embedded in learning activities that do not build prior knowledge. So you're not going to be able to acquire the I+1 from Krashen if you do not embed the learning in what they already know. This is quite interesting. It's called these learning styles, and it just shows you there's a circle we have to go through to reach meaningful learning. And we can start anywhere in the circle, but we've actually got to go the whole circle. But usually it's the learner experience is at the center, not your experience as a teacher, but where your learners are at that point, that prior learning, that what do they have, what do they know? And this will often start with concrete experience, things that they've actually done. So they've drawn a graph or created a graph. They've done a mind map about something. It's concrete experience that they've had about it, so they've done it. This can also be gained by observing and reflecting on different things. So the teacher giving a demonstration, watching what other people do. I know I've often used that as a learning experience. I reflect on it, and this is what watching is all about. Then we go into more the abstract side. So once we've got the concrete experience, we've moved to observation and reflection. We can start the abstract, the content reduced, okay, not the embedded, which is the concrete experience, which is more BICS. We go into more the CALP when we get onto the abstract learning conceptualization. And then we move finally onto the doing part. And that's why I always say in your lesson plans, get them to do something. You can't just end a lesson like that without them having to apply that knowledge, get them to do something. This is a wonderful, so when you get this, when I upload this PowerPoint, don't throw away this picture, go and study it, how best we learn when we move through this cycle, that we don't get stuck in our preferred mode, that I don't only want to observe and experience. I've got to move out of that mode. I've got to go into the abstract learning, the conceptualization, the harder part of learning, and then I've got to do something. I might not like doing it, but I have to move into that. Sometimes I can't only do, I must also do the abstract learning and conceptualization. So it's a lovely diagram of where we need to move so that learning can take place. Yes, I love this visual. To learn, students need to do something. You can't just speak, you must do something, otherwise you are not learning and you're going to be very bored. Okay, so you've got to get your class to do things at the end of the day. That's why I make you do things too, online tracking. Right, our grammar rules. Okay, and knowledge of grammar rules is this comprehensible input and output. So if I know grammar rules, will that make me a proficient English speaker? What do you think? I know all these rules. Okay, the rule one is a complete sentence must include a noun and a verb. Okay, example, the bird flew. So if I know that rule, will that make me a better writer and speaker? Or maybe if I know rule 3, the only exception to these rules is the imperative sentence, which is the command, and that is go away. I'm telling you now that a knowledge of these rules are not going to make your students better writers. I have taught English second language for a long time as well, and English home language, and even if they know the rule of past tense, present tense, they will still make mistakes in their writing because the knowledge of the rule is not going to make them more proficient, I promise you. The fact that they know it's a noun or that's a verb is not going to make them a better writer. Those rules are not going to really assist. So how do we actually incorporate the understanding of rules into grammar teaching? So here we go. I'm reiterating what I said before. Grammar exposure and rules are not comprehensible input. So it's not going to make me a more proficient speaker of the language or writer of the language. There's nothing interesting about these rules, parts of speech or third person singular. Why is that exciting? It's not exciting at all. It makes students very bored and puts them to sleep. They actually never hear of rules except in the classroom. No one will actually comment on the grammar rules. Sometimes when someone sends me a text or when I send a text and I see I've done an error, I'll go, oh, because I know I've used you instead of your, which I often do. I forget what the R. But I forget, my finger seems to slip. But when I read it, I see I've made the error. So just remember that we don't learn a language by knowing the rules. So the traditional classroom where you possibly have come from is research is showing that the grammar rules are very fragile. That means they can collapse and break apart and they're often forgotten. So you're not going to be a good English speaker just because you know the rules. Again, the iceberg. Going to Cummins, it's just the tip of the iceberg, those grammar rules. If you focus your grammar on output, that is only the tip, okay? And whatever is at the tip is going to melt away quickly. So they're not going to understand a lot of what you said if they know all those rules. It's going to be forgotten. Okay, let's get rid of those rules. So don't focus on rules ever. Let's again go to Cummins' iceberg model, which looks at the BICS. That was Kalani in the case study, who could speak very well, but couldn't actually write or read very well. Again, we've got the iceberg analogy, the BICS, which is your basic language proficiency, the BICS, which is only surface level learning. And if you're just going to focus on pronunciation, I see a lot of you like pronunciation as well from the genre studies, vocab, grammar. It's only going to be the tip of the iceberg. And if you're focusing on that, it's all going to melt away. To actually get, as I said, BICS is not CALP. To get to real academic language proficiency, cognitive language proficiency, you have to go down to the bottom. You've got to look at analysis. You've got to look at synthesis. This is where your summary writing comes in. So your argumentative writing comes in, where you're looking at functional and semantic use of language, which meaning is not always apparent. You've actually got to work out that meaning and make a clear distinction between maybe comparison and contrast in things, and able to analyze things according to that. So how do we acquire CALP, the cognitive academic language proficiency? It's a language we need for reasoning, which is more complex, hard, giving reasons for things, reasons why not, reasons for, how to solve problems. It's our general academic discourse that we need, which is a more formal, context-reduced, abstract type of reasoning, and it's very, very structured. So if you want to get CALP as a learner, you've got to give them an extensive vocab. Yes, they will have to know a lot of words and meanings. So you've got to build on vocab, not just vocab though. You've got to understand conceptual understandings. Why was the discourse used to isolate a person? And you have to be able to understand all those kind of conceptual uses of language. How does knowledge of how to decontextualize academic language, how can I understand and break down the critical language awareness to understand that this person is using exclusion, or there's no politeness, or there is there's too much informality in the way they are speaking. Those are kinds of things you need to decontextualize. And if you look at your own writing, try and be critical of your own writing. How am I writing? Am I too informal? Am I too formal? Am I too terse? Am I too friendly? All those ways you need to contextualize and decontextualize the way you are writing. There's again our iceberg, and you can see the BICS, the basic interpersonal communication skills, is not context reduced, it's context embedded. We can see people's facial expressions, so we know they're angry, we know they're happy. It's our day-to-day chit-chat that we can talk to our friends, send informal emails, text messages. That's that kind of language. But whereas the CALP is context reduced, that means there's no non-verbal clues that I can build my understanding on. The language becomes quite abstract, it's very conceptual and theoretical. And this is the language necessary to understand, discuss content, how we actually use it to discuss meaningful stuff, which you can't actually use non-verbal and informal language for. It's got to have a conceptual understanding, which is more complex and more difficult. And this is the kind of language that our students need in grade 12. So the input processing, what do we give our students? We must push them into processing. So it becomes part of the linguistic system. So we mustn't leave them at the I+0. We must push them into the I+1 so they can become part of this whole repertoire they have for language understanding. So we've got to immerse them. So it means they swim in text, different kinds of text, visual, brochures, advertisements, different kinds of books, different kinds of genres, from plays to poetry, all over, newspapers, magazines, cartoons, which have got a range of grammatical structures and words. Think about newspapers, they've got a lot of direct, indirect, critical language awareness, all kinds of language structures that appear in newspapers. And this will give them comprehensible input. We're going to push them in by using comprehensible input, by using a lot of text within our classroom. Nothing is going to be isolated. And this is going to ensure there's a better understanding of language usage than the old structured-based methods do, like remembering the rules and regurgitation and repeating. So this is the whole comprehensible input umbrella, what we're going to give them. We're going to talk about movies, okay? And then we're going to actually write the review, or we're going to look at the shots or the clips. We're going to embed reading into everything. We're going to look at predictions. We're going to look at scanning and skimming. We're going to read and discuss things to get them to be critical of the language use. What were the socio effects of saying this to the person? We're going to look at content-based instruction. What are we teaching in other courses, and how does this impact on language that we teach? We're going to listen and draw stuff, okay? Listen and write things, and picture talk, the whole literal visual literacy aspect of it. And in this way, we're going to get input into our students. We're going to immerse them in the text and the language usage by doing these kind of practices. And it's not about me, teacher, talking, it's about my learners speaking in the class in authentic communication scenarios. I love Albert Einstein when he says, never memorize what you can look up in books. And you can look up all grammar rules in books. So why must I memorize something when I can take my PowerPoint slide and I can go and check the answer on that? So research indicates that proficiency improves, language proficiency is going to improve when teachers encourage discussions. Okay, so you make sure that your students are talking about grammatical items. So you're going to discuss grammar stuff that they have read, heard, or spoken. So as it appears within the text, you can then speak about those grammatical items, maybe the adjectives, the preposition use. We can look at a few examples now, and that will improve their proficiency. This will push them into a structured input for processing and keeping it very much in a learner-centered classroom. So we have to push our students to actually think about the input we're giving them in a structured way when we're talking about grammar. So input processing we give them. Sometimes it's good to break the rules. Yes, you can. The first one here is that all sentences must end in a preposition, must not end in a preposition. So you can't end it in with or in or from or to. You can't do that. So for instance, the example they give them is from where do you come? Okay, which is very grammatically correct. It's hard to use in academic language. You can say, where do you come from? I mean, that makes sense as well. The split infinitive, to slowly walk. What about to walk slowly, which is correct, but can't you say to slowly walk? So those are ways that you can break the rules. The last one here is you can't start a sentence with a conjunction. You can't start a sentence with and, you can't start a sentence with but, you can't start a sentence with so, with if, and the rule says yes, you can. And the example they give you, and that leads me to my next point. Okay, I'm starting with and. Okay, that makes sense to me. And they say as long as that's followed with the proper subject and verb, that's totally all right. So just remember there are some rules. We can't be too pedantic, that we can break them as well. So input processing occurs when learners discuss things, and we must say the importance of discussing, and they discuss the language forms with understanding. That means they've got comprehensible input about what they're discussing in socially significant interaction. So they're talking amongst their peers, they're talking about things to do with language, and they've got the understanding, they've got the prior knowledge which they've built on. Okay, I'm giving you the first example is what about the present perfect tense? Okay, how do we teach that? Is it important? How would we teach it? So this is an activity that you could actually have the comprehensible input as well as speaking about grammar in a very, very structured way that is going to be meaningful because it's based on text. Okay, does that make sense? So you get the learners to construct sentences containing information about where they live and how long they've lived there. So this is the content. Where do you live now and how long have you lived there? So let's look at how this can actually work. There's my house, that's where I live. So they can choose to stay in the actual place where they stay or an imaginary place. And then they'll need a picture of a house and they will need 3 random past dates. Could be 2020, 2018, and 2030, for instance. So they're going to construct sentences and they're going to have a picture of a house and 3 random past dates. So the task instructions are read the past dates provided that they've provided, and then they must decide on which date you and your family moved into the house. So it can be totally fictitious. They can say, we moved into our house in 2019 or 2016, or we're going to know when we did. Okay, so it's past tense. There's the house, and they choose a picture of the house, or something like that. That looks like a container, which is quite a cute house, or something like that. That's the home. Remember, it can be fictitious. They could put a tent there, they could put anything they like, a cave, if that's the kind of house they prefer. Then use your correct address or any address. So you've got to have an address, you've got a past date, you've got to have a picture of your house, and you have to have a correct address. Then you're going to write a sentence stating where you live and when you moved into your house. So my address and when I moved in. And you have to use the word since. So you're going to give them this information, and now you're going to say, write a sentence using that. And this could be the sentence they might design or construct. Since we moved into our new home at 23 Kai Road in July 2020, we have walked to school. So for the past year, they have walked to school every day since they've moved in. Okay. Then they read their sentence to the class or to their peers, and then they read a whole passage after this that's written in the present perfect tense. You haven't actually told them with the present perfect tense. They're just using those formations to try and put this together. So you have the sentence. Since we moved into our new home at 23 Kai Road in July 2020, we have walked to school. So the rule is, that's now the rule if you want to teach it to them, the present perfect tense starts in the past and continues to the present moment, okay? So it comes from the past, use of has or have as your past participle, moves you from the past into the present, okay? So that would be the rule. Then you go through the passage, so they know it's got has or have. It's from the past into the present, and here's the story about Sino. It's what he says, 6 months have passed since then, okay, since whatever that was then. Sino has exercised every day and has shed 15 kilograms. He has bought new clothes. He has changed his diet. He only eats vegetables, fish, fruit, and fish. Now, Sino has made new friends and has spent time helping others. Although he has been busy, Sino has been making time to continue his PGCE studies, okay? Then they'll go and they'll recognize all the uses of the use of the past participle. They've got the have passed, has exercised. They've also got present perfect, continuous as well in the last sentence, has been making time, and he's a very good PGCE student, okay? So that's how we can bring in an understanding of the present perfect tense and how it's being used. There's another inductive method that they can discover for grammar teaching. They learn through observation and discovery of the rule. So you don't go and tell them the rule, they would learn and discover that rule. So previous exercise, they actually weren't, it wasn't inductive, which you actually taught them the rule and they went to find it as well. So they will look at real texts or pictures to do the study, and then using the pictures to think about preposition use. And here we've got the whole use of masks, which is very relevant today. Stop AU coronavirus. Yeah, is another very spectacular face mask. Here's another one. If you can read this, you're too close. And then you could move to whole understanding of how prepositions and masks might be used by asking certain questions like, where is this mask worn? Okay, on the face, which is the preposition, on, okay? Where is the mask placed? Over the nose, or under the nose, or under the chin, or above the chin. So you could actually see all the different ways they could actually place their mask. Where do you place your mask? Over my nose, under my nose. So you could actually use the different ways they actually wear their masks. Why is it mask worn? To prevent us from, okay, getting COVID. Where do you store your masks? Under my socks, in my drawer, on top of my drawer, under my bed, in the wash. How will they actually use that preposition? Where do you buy your masks? Sorry, it's an error. We buy it from at Pick and Pay, at Clicks, at Discount. Don't buy them, whatever they might say. In the road, where they get their masks. Where can masks be discarded? Under my bed, on top of my bed, in my washing basket, through my window. Those are different ways they can actually talk about preposition use. Some water quickly. Okay, using pictures to learn about adjectives. Let's look at this. So for each of these pictures, they're going to write down the names of the objects they've seen, or an abstract noun. So here we've got a netball group of girls, and they could say the objects are the bibs that the girls are wearing, netball players. There's the ball, there's the net, there's the post, there's the field, there's the lines, there's the players, and then abstract nouns like determined, joyful, happy, stressed, angry, that will go with those objects. This is the same thing. This is a soccer picture. You can say the objects are the ball, the lines on the field, the different soccer shoes, the bibs, whatever they might be. and what are the abstract nouns like determination, defend, being defensive, angry, irritated, whatever they might be on the soccer field. Here again, you've got the hockey situation, hockey stick. These are things that you could use, which sports students play. You can actually ask them to bring a picture to class depicting the sport that they play, and they could do this exercise from that. There's the cricketers, you've got the bats, you've got the wickets, the elation that he's feeling, the joy with possibly scoring a 4, 6, whatever it might be, the whole helmet that they've got on there, and then the abstract nouns as well. Then write down the adjectives to describe the nouns. They've got the objects or the nouns, and they've got the abstracts, and they write down adjectives to describe the nouns. A white bat, a strong bat, a professional bat, a secure helmet. So these are kinds of things they could use. And then they write a paragraph using those adjectives to describe the nouns. So it'll be a whole description of the scenario using the objects or the nouns and then the abstract nouns to describe them. So here's the Olympics as well, abstract use of nouns, how the runner's feeling, determined, aggressive, scared, how is she feeling, abstract noun, graceful, beautiful, strong, athletic, those kind of things. Victorious, abstract noun, joyful, elated, obviously very proud of what he's achieved. And then the closeness of these, the joy that they're feeling, or maybe it's just support, comfort, sympathy that he's been experienced in that picture. And yeah, we've got her son, that's definitely joy, victorious in terms of what she's achieved. And yeah, we've got soccer, determination, focus, attention, those kinds of things. And then they could write a whole paragraph about what all the players are feeling in this event that they're experiencing. So this is my third example, using pictures to learn about sentence construction now. And here you have to look at the illustration, describe what is happening. So you can use the player is groaning because he has hurt his knee, or he's been kicked in the knee. The good team players are helping each other off when his friend has injured his calf muscle. The player was blown out by the ref because she had kicked the ball incorrectly, whatever it might be. But this is where you're going to get them to write a full sentence using nouns, using verbs, using a full sentence structure. There we go again. We've got athletics. Jackson was very thrilled when he's hit the finishing line and beat all his competitors. Okay, what you can do is change that statement to a question using what. What was Jackson feeling when he crossed the line? Okay, why did Jackson run so fast? I don't know, just think about all the different what, why, when, and where, and they can change this. And here we're looking at question formations and statement formations, just using pictures. But you might say, what about language errors? I need to correct. Where's my red pen? Didn't correct. I never use the red pen to correct because I think it's terrible. It's a very aggressive way of showing students what's going wrong. So in writing, instead of writing out the correct form of the errors, which a lot of teachers do, you can make them use a reference numbering system, which works quite nicely in this example. So you could underline the errors and then write a number with a grammatical explanation of those errors. So the learner will refer to your list of errors, they'll look at the numbers and then see if they can understand what the reason is, and then they can correct the error, often after chatting to their peers about if this error is now correct and or if it's still incorrect. So that is a more positive and constructive way to deal with errors. So this is the example. So the learner wrote, yesterday the man panicked when he see there was too little time left. And the teacher writes, it's a 7 error, it's a 12.4 error, and it's a 9 error. So these are the explanations that they are given. A 7 is for verbs ending in a C. Then they need a K when the suffix begins with the vowels are added. I can't see what's underneath there. But the C, you need the K to continue. The next one, 12.4, the simple past tense describe an action that has happened at some time in the past. And there is the 12.4. and then the use of to and to. Okay, he went to town, a preposition. He went to, an adverb of degree. I want to do it, part of the infinitive to do. All right. And then the learner reads the explanations and corrects the written text and consults with his friends and rewrites the text, something like this. Yesterday, the man panicked, put the K there, when he saw there was too little time left. Past tense and the use of to, the verb of degree. Okay. And can chat with his friend and see if that is correct now too. Okay, so how can we ensure learners are ready to learn the different ways that we are looking at teaching language? So you must ensure that these activities and outcomes are achievable. It's not too difficult for them, that they can manage with the rules that you've given them and looking at what they've written, and they can help their friends and check together. Are you helping them, mediating what they are doing so they can be scaffolded and understand, and then they can be ready to learn? Are you relating things to their everyday experience, things that they understand? Do they understand about the Olympics that I've just used now? Would that be a good example? Would it be a good example to use sport? Maybe it's not. Maybe it'd be other things that are more meaningful to them. But remember, you can always ask them to bring pictures, maybe of different kinds of fruits, different kinds of foods they like, different kinds of places they like, different kinds of cars they like, different kinds of phones, which they will definitely love, to class. And then structure the learning so that they can experience success. So if they have to give a whole lot of nouns for a car or a cell phone, and then adjectives to describe them, I think it'll be a lot of success will come with that, and they'll develop a positive attitude towards that learning experience. Okay, there they are, jubilating. So make your classes deliberately interesting, and that means not you talking all the time. Enjoyable, that they're learning something that they know something about, they have a prior experience, and very challenging as well. Not too challenging, I+1, but not boring either. This is an example from a class that I was with in 2020. Yeah, they are looking at the lyrics of a song, and they were actually looking at alliterations used within the lyrics, and they were very intrigued with it because they love music. So it's enjoyable. It's relating it to poetry, which they'll move on to, looking at alliteration, different kinds of parts of speech, figures of speech. So you can see they're discussing it with the teacher. She's highlighted, or they've highlighted certain things on the text. How else can we ensure learners are ready to learn? Is that if we provoke or provide curiosity, so they want to know why or how, or what if. So if you're discussing possibly vaccinations, why do some people not want to be vaccinated? And you can discuss why they don't want to. How did this happen? What if they were? All kinds of ways you can actually bring in things that are meaningful to them and give them that discussion which provokes curiosity. It could be on gender-based violence. It could be on bullying. There's lots of topics that students are passionate about. Soccer, sport, music, phones, social media, all the things that you can actually bring into the classroom, which you can talk about, and they can learn about different structures because through that. Remember, the joy of learning is not looking like that. It's not giving them tests, assignments, and exams. That's not the joy of learning. The joy of learning is discussing, being curious, and finding out things. So consider their knowledge, their skills, and their attitudes in your class, and might be quite diverse. What bring with them into the classroom, and this is where you've got to focus your learning. I noticed in grade 8, there's got this thing about murder, this one story, how this woman plots her husband's murder. Okay, maybe students like that. I know my granddaughter, who's now in grade 7, she's doing a whole presentation. She wants to become an investigator of crime scenes. Maybe this is what we're experiencing in our world, and this is making it interesting for our students. Then they must develop their understanding of the concepts and the principles, and rather than recall the factual information. So to understand the principle of how we use past tense when we're writing a report, or when we're using indirect speech, rather than that recall, and how these routine skills are repeated, so they can think they can understand what the use of past tense is by just repeating those skills. So it'll be something like this in this cartoon in the frame 1. Teacher says, hello students, let's start our lesson. Okay, all of you like starting your lessons with a question, and they say to each other, She will make us repeat again and again. Okay, are you that kind of teacher? In frame 2, repeat 10 times the different food tastes. Okay, and there they go. Salt, sweet, bitter, sour. Salty, sweet, bitter, sour. Are you that kind of teacher that makes them repeat and regurgitate rules, thinking it's going to improve the way they can understand things? Also consider their different diverse cultural and linguistic backgrounds. You've also got to take cognizance of that, because you can't have the I+2, which is too difficult or just out of their realm of thinking as well. And look at this from the same school, a different class, grade 8s. And you can just see how diverse the students are. We've got Muslim students, we've got students from different societies, areas, and yeah, they're all working together. Obviously, the little one in the front, top left, top right is rather focusing on his friend, but the others seem quite happy and pleased to work in the class and working together. Not very many books around. I think they're doing this discussion about something, but this is how diverse our school classrooms are. So text-based approaches are so important. Everything must be based on the text in language learning. What types of media are you going to use? Are you going to use print media, broadcast media, digital media? In your language class, you can use all 3 of those. What kind of text are you going to use? Newspapers, magazines, books, listening videos. How are you going to use that in your class? What about visual material? Images, cartoons, brochures, the whole visual aspect of it. And with all of those, how are you going to say what is the purpose of that visual and for what audience is it intended as well? These are things you need to consider. This is an advertisement I got from the Tokyo Olympics. Who was the audience for this? What is the purpose? Why did Coca-Cola choose this advertisement to go in there and to discuss that? I can see at the bottom of all the different kinds of sports. It's a worldwide partner, Coca-Cola. Okay, I think, and that's also, I think Toyota was one of the main sponsors as well. But how would you improve this? Who is it focusing on? Is it just the players, or is it the businesses that they are focusing this on? Quite a nice media and the different colors of the players. We see the swimmers, there is the baseball players, there's the equestrian, shooting, all of those kind of sports. So to analyze this kind of episode, and how could they improve it? So teachers have to mediate the learning. You've got to scaffold, you're part of the process, but you're not taking over. This is when you support your learning in the classroom. And so how do you do this? You will provide examples of paragraphs, keywords, tenses. You'll ask questions, enable ask questions, templates, which are your models. You'll give criteria for how to do different things. You'll show them how to classify. There's all from CAPS, making lists, reading instructions, skimming, scanning, survey, and that kind of speed reading techniques that you can have in the classroom. And so if you look at this little task here, what strategies could you use to teach the apostrophe, which is the most difficult grammatical structure to actually learn? Or how do you teach verb agreement, which is concord, that you will say, I is, not I is, I am. We are, not we is. Okay, how will you teach, especially Afrikaans people already battle with concord as well. How will you teach direct speech? So just think about the next question. What text-based activities could you have to acquire one grammar-focused concept? So if I want to acquire the past tense, what text-based activities could I do? And newspapers would be a great way to do this, because they've got a lot of direct speech, indirect speech, with the introductions, the conclusions, that you could possibly learn about past tense in a newspaper. How would you acquire the apostrophes? I think maybe as well, with especially more informal topics where you've got lots of contractions and so on, could help you with the use of the apostrophe as well in that kind of exercise. Think about it. So what's next? Yeah, I'm on my last slide, luckily. What did Stephen Krashen say? He's our second language acquisition, but I think it's also relevant to home language, that students are not going to acquire the language or will not gain acquisition of the language if they've got an extensive use of conscious grammatical rules. That's not going to give them language acquisition, and nor does tedious drills help them to do this. Remember in our English home language classes, we've got many students who are not mother tongue home language speakers. So they've also got to acquire the language. Some of them, especially Afrikaans students, maybe have really acquired a good level of English, and same with other students from other language groups. But they're not going to acquire it if you give them conscious grammatical rules. It's not going to give them language acquisition. And don't let them actually have to be tediously drilling and repeating those different exercises. This is just a taste. Next week, we're going to look at more specifically at grammar. Just to realize that we've got to be text-based. We must be isolated. It must be part of the actual text that we're immersing the student on, that these rules will emerge, and using rather an inductive process where they can actually discover the rules rather than you telling them and drilling them. Okay, so yes, our priority be to make learning fun, not tedious. And if we have a fun episode in our class, fun teaching, the learning will come, okay, and they won't be bored in your class. So that's all from me today. There will be an online tracking task on this, which I'll now open up for you. It only has to be finished by the 22nd of August. Remember, the choice is yours to do or not to do. It helps a lot when you've got those good online tracking when it comes in assessment 5. So just try and do them, okay? Even if you get 5, it's fine, okay? So good night and take care. Stay safe, stay warm in this freezing weather, and I'll chat to you again next week. Okay, bye for now.